Greetings, I'm Nick Wallace. I'm a V Specialist out of Central Division.
And I'm Raj. I'm also a V Specialist out of the Central Division.
So the intent of this presentation and demo that you're about to receive is to do an examination on DevOps. There's a little bit more than what meets the eye when it comes to DevOps, and we'll be getting into that a little further, but there's also some competitive advantages that can be gained for those businesses that want to adopt the DevOps practice within their organization. Some of those competitive advantages may be increasing or maintaining their customer and market share, or mitigating risk in certain areas, or looking for ways to augment existing revenue streams, or to find other potential business opportunities as well. But ultimately, it's to help the IT organization gain more operational efficiencies in which they can work with the businesses that they support and be more better aligned with them. So as you can see, a lot of traditional IT organizations are structured and have been structured in a very siloed format.
Yep.
So today we got software development teams working very quickly on producing software and adding new features to their existing software. Also we have IT operations teams that support those software development teams in not only keeping the lights on, but also ensuring that that software is running very efficiently and optimized. And we also have quality assurance teams and project managers and product managers that are interfacing with these teams to ensure that the quality of their product is up to standards and up to par for what they're trying to achieve. So with DevOps, you can think of this more as like a convergence of these organizations. They all coming together to achieve the same goal that they lay out, that the business has laid out for them. And so in order to move quickly in what the business is trying to achieve, it also requires these IT organizations that were traditionally siloed to become better aligned. Not only internally, but also more aligned with what the business is trying to do.
That is correct, Nick. And if I may, the whole challenge with traditional siloed IT infrastructure is that every silo or every division within that organization is completely separate, and there is usually not a lot of give and take between these divisions. So they kind of work in these isolated islands, which is actually a huge issue because it lends to all the inefficiencies and waste and delaying of projects, especially around software development, that the company can take advantage of. It really, I like to say, think of it this way. When our EMC teams go out on an account and campaign for something, they take along all the resources. They take along the specialist SEs, they take along the core SEs, the account team from different BUs, and everybody is working together on the same page towards a common business goal, which is essentially to conclude that campaign in a satisfactory manner and help the customer as much as possible. So it is the same kind of thing in DevOps. In DevOps, you're taking the developers and the operations team, so DevOps, and you're combining them together to form one cohesive whole entity that works together as a whole with full cooperation, empathy, and communication, clear communication between all these teams so they all work towards a common goal.
Absolutely. Yeah, and empathy is the key there too. They all know that they experience some pain in some format, and they don't want to inflict that pain on each other either. Right. So they definitely work to help streamline a lot of the processes that they're doing and working together. And again, when we talk about DevOps, it's also not necessarily a department or an organization that you're going to spin up either, because if the whole intent of DevOps is to try to tear down those silos that exist today, by building a DevOps organization, you're essentially also creating another silo that's not necessary.
That is correct. Yes.
Yeah, so it is, like we said, it's a culture and a mind share in which everybody needs to understand and participate in.
That is right.
And so, you know, Amazon has been very successful in what they've done. This DevOps concept is nothing new, even though the phrase has been recently coined as DevOps maybe about 5 years ago. But there's been a lot of companies that have been very successful that have started to pursue this practice, and Amazon is one of them. So when you look at the CTO of Amazon, Werner Vogels, He says that the traditional model is that you take your software to the wall that separates development and operations and throw it over and forget about it.
Yeah.
We have seen that a lot, and there can be some finger pointing and stuff that happens and takes place through that model.
That happens in a siloed organization.
Yeah.
That leads to that kind of behavior.
Absolutely. And so what he goes on to say is, not at Amazon, you build it, you run it. This brings developers into the contact with the day-to-day operations of their software. It also brings them into day-to-day contact with the customer. And that customer feedback loop is essential for improving the quality of service.
Yes.
And speaking of which, we're going to go a little bit deeper into this feedback loop that he's referring to. This is what we call validated learning. And if you look at this feedback loop, it's taking the conception of an idea and then building around that idea, whether that be writing code, and then measuring it through monitoring and metrics and some key performance indicators or whatever it could be, however you measure that. You collect data from that, and then you want to learn from that, and then move on to the next idea.
Yes.
And so these feedback loops are intended to be short feedback loops that minimize the total throughput throughout the loop. Now you can look at these feedback loops as being from the customer to the business, and so that the business is then analyzing what it is that the customer is potentially asking for without the customer even knowing that they're asking for it. You're analyzing how you're interfacing with your customer.
Yes.
And then that feedback loop is then relayed from the business back to the DevOps organization to be able to deliver on that very quickly.
Yes.
And so there's a book that, this is pretty much the foundation of this book, called The Lean Startup. And the Lean Startup is intended not only to help support those companies that want to get into the startup business and potentially disrupt, but this is also intended for large companies and enterprises that want to think and deliver like a startup as well.
Yes.
By adopting a lot of these practices and methodologies that are put in place in this book. So there's some great stories in this book about how Groupon became Groupon and how Dropbox became Dropbox, but also there's some examples of some large enterprise organizations that are looking to be innovative, more innovative, and disrupt themselves internally, and so they want to create these little pockets of innovation within their business, and they don't want the same bureaucracies and processes and stuff like that to be put in the way of their innovation process.
This is especially challenging for large organizations because traditionally large organizations like big ships take a long time to change course. So how do they stay competitive with these small upstarts that are coming up all the time and disrupting the market? And one way to do that, like you said, is to build these pockets of innovation that are completely melded together in their communication lines, and then help them bring up those ideas so they can compete with these startups.
Yeah, absolutely. And so a continuation of this series is called The Lean Enterprise. And this is a book that was also co-authored and written by one of the authors that wrote a book called Continuous Delivery, Jez Humble, who now is VP at Chef. But this is a very good book, too, to help those large enterprises innovate at scale.
Right.
And so that brings us to, in software development circles, a concept called an MVP, or minimum viable product. And to break it down, what this actually means is if a company is looking to adopt or incorporate some new feature, then they go at it through this process called an MVP. And with an MVP, let's say in this example that our idea is to create a vehicle for human transportation. And so how would you go about doing that? One option would be you build a car. But that may not be very efficient because as you're building this car, it may take a long time to do. And if you give pieces of that car to your customers, they're not going to be happy with that, right? So the concept is to, if I want to create a vehicle for human transportation, maybe I take a board and put a set of wheels on it, and then I give that to the customer. Again, it's a vehicle for human transportation, but then it will eventually evolve into what could become an automobile. But all along the way, you got this customer feedback loop in place, in which then that feedback loop is relayed from the business to the DevOps team to deliver on. But the customer may say, you know what, I really like this, but I think you may be able to get more riders if you put a handle on this, so that you got people with better balance. And then all of a sudden, well, what if we put, a gear system on this in a seat and eliminate some of the energy that you put into it? And then that evolves to putting a combustible engine in on this two-wheel vehicle. And then eventually you get to a car. But all along the way, you got a working product in your customer's hands in which they're happy with. And on the flip side, you're happy because you're still bringing in revenue.
Yes.
This is also described and is used in companies that have an agile process in place.
Yeah.
And if you want to know more about agile, there's an agile manifesto in which people and their interactions are valued more than tools and processes. There's also the 12 principles of agile, but as you can see, agile follows systems thinking, which systems thinking, means we have an entire system and there's all these parts within the system that work, but they need to work together. And you need to understand the value and the importance of all of those parts. They don't work without. The system's not going to work without them.
That's a great example of where the agile process thinking and the concept of DevOps maps together, because in systems thinking, you're thinking of the whole system. You're not concentrating on each part of the system, although each part is critical to the system. In traditional IT, you're concentrating on the parts and you're losing sight of the total system, and that's what slows you down.
Absolutely. And so Puppet Labs, every year for the last few years, has released this report called The State of DevOps. And as they have interviewed and surveyed a lot of these companies that practice DevOps, they're able to find some key stats. And some of them is these companies are able to deploy 30 times more frequently. They're able to have shorter lead times in the delivery of some of their features that they're talking about wanting to deliver. They are also able to experience fewer failures because they execute on this in short sprints as well. And then so when you do that, if you put in something that's going to break your system, you're able to identify that very quickly because it's a minimum feature that can be backed out very quickly and easily to correct or fix. And then also you're able to recover a lot faster. And so what this ultimately means is you're able to it helps us go faster and break stuff less.
And you see this every day. If you're using a mobile device, which I'm sure most people watching this are, take a look at the updates you get from the App Store on all the applications you have. There are numerous builds that come out so frequently, it puts Windows patching to shame. So if you look at what the companies are doing that are sending out these patches, this is exactly what they're doing. They are adding incremental features and benefits while taking care of bug fixes at a very, very rapid pace.
Absolutely, great example. And so Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz published an essay in the Wall Street Journal about 5 years ago that he claims software is eating the world. And that is still, over that course of time, is continuing to prove itself to be true. And now we're entering in this area in which it's the Internet of Things. And it's all driven by cloud computing and these distributed systems and this level of convenience that the cloud provides to the people that use these apps that are out there. But we're now moving into a new kind of digital era in which the face of the consumer is changing from a human going into a store and picking a product off the shelf to now these customers and consumers that are interfacing with this business is now changing to a digital user.
Yep.
And what that is causing is pressure for these businesses that interface with those customers and that market share to provide a level of convenience to them so that they can continue to maintain their customer base, but also allow them to interface with their customers a lot more conveniently. So it's also forcing the hand of a lot of these businesses to turn themselves into a software company as well, or into a digital business of some sort to be able to continue to interface with their customer base today. When you look at disruption in general, Uber came out of nowhere and disrupted these industries that were already well established. Mm-hmm. So today when we interface with a lot of our customers, you can ask them who their competitors are and they usually know. They rattle off that list of competitors. And on the flip side, neither they or we know who their actual competitor is, because there may be some startup that comes up with an app that taps into their market share and gains their customers without them even knowing that that was coming.
Yep.
Right? So that's again why a lot of these businesses are experiencing this pressure to transform themselves into a software company.
Yes. It's funny you say that, because the CIO of a very large pizza chain once told me that our strategy to become the #1 pizza restaurant on the planet is to think of ourselves as a software company from now on that happens to sell pizzas.
Good point. Yeah, and when we're talking about these competitive advantages too, I also work with a mortgage lending company, and you would think that they don't necessarily need to have an app to maintain their customer base, but they're in an industry in which they are highly regulated and they need to maintain compliance. So they're one of my most advanced DevOps organizations, mainly because their competitive advantage is to create software that's going to help ensure that they maintain their compliance and regulations, because that is their competitive advantage from a lot of their competition in their industry. So as you can see, there's several different ways in which businesses may want to pursue this. Mm-hmm. And so how much time is spent with a lot of these companies doing systems integration and systems interface work? When we look at this in the traditional IT model and that same stack that I just showed you, a lot of companies are racking and stacking their gear, doing the configuration and management to connect all of these different entities all the way up the stack. There's a lot of time that's spent and effort that goes into that. Mm-hmm. When we talk to our customers about the software-defined data center and delivering operations and infrastructure in a self-service delivery model, that is what the developers are looking for and asking for, because they are moving at a very fast pace, and the IT operations organization that supports them needs to keep up. So that's when we talk to them about automating as many processes as they can to integrate delivering infrastructure up the stack from the OS layer down. I'll be going a little further into what platform as a service is today, but it's also trying to find ways to automate and create a platform from the OS layer up into the middleware and the runtime environments. But when we talk about infrastructure as a service, we also have a converged infrastructure portfolio that our customers can buy today that will allow them to automate a lot of these processes and get some of these solutions that are very turnkey and out of the box and supported. And so we have simple appliances that can be leveraged in our vSpecs Blue product platform. We also have blocks, and we also have racks with VX Rack that can help customers deliver infrastructure very quickly.
And this is a huge strength that the EMC portfolio has. When our customers want to shift to a DevOps culture internally and want to promote the agile development kind of methodology and make it available to their consumers or developers, we can really help, because we are providing them converged infrastructure that takes them away from the nitty-gritty of trying to manage compute, storage, and network, and instead give them infrastructure that essentially becomes VM vending machines or container vending machines. And these vending machines are literally, you plug them in, minimal configuration that needs to be done, and you can start building on those. So IT can stop trying to build roads like they always try to do traditionally, and instead offer a road that's ready to drive on right away.
Good point. And so Cloud Foundry plays in the platform as a service space. It's an open foundation in which almost all the big players in the IT industry, to include Dell, IBM, Cisco, Microsoft, they're all contributing to this foundation because they want to be able to standardize on this, because they believe that delivering these cloud-native apps is essentially the future. And to be able to standardize on that is going to help all of our customers become successful as well. And our industry has a lot of insight into what it takes to deliver on this. So Cloud Foundry is open source foundation, but we also have our own distribution of Cloud Foundry with Pivotal Cloud Foundry.
Pivotal Cloud Foundry actually adds a lot of value to the traditional open source Cloud Foundry that anybody can download. In the regular open source Cloud Foundry format, which by the way is probably the single most popular platform for developers, that they love it. They love Cloud Foundry. Pivotal brings in a lot of the services and microservices and dependencies that code requires or needs, and makes it part of the platform, so that, and as Nick will show you later, it becomes really, really simple to deploy, scale, bring back down, scale out, scale up, have multiple instances of applications, or make changes to applications.
Yeah, absolutely. And also we're working on some other projects as well to make this more easier to consume for our customers.
Yeah.
Project Caspian is a good example of that, but
Yes.
we're also working on some other projects too that stay tuned for. So how can EMC help you escape technical debt? Today when we look at IT operations, we see that a lot of their time is spent, typically around 80% of their time is spent on keeping the lights on and fighting fires and trying to get over outages and things like that. And the other 20% is trying to push the needle forward and keep the ball moving up the court, so to speak, in pursuing a lot of their automation strategies. But what we want to be able to do is help them flip that, right? So that 80% of their time can be spent on moving the ball forward versus keeping the lights on. And so when we look at the Cloud Evolution platform, again, it's very similar to that traditional IT stack. But being able to deliver infrastructure as a service, we know how complex and complicated that can be and how much of a daunting task it could potentially be. But there's a lot of benefits that can be gained from it after the fact.
To be clear, setting it up is daunting, consuming it is easy.
Absolutely. Well, the same can be said about platform as a service as well.
Yeah.
And so if we look at the Pivotal Cloud Foundry architecture, we can see that this looks very complicated as well, as applications are coming in off of the internet to access the app, either applications or people or whatever it is out of that Internet of Things that is accessing that app. We can see through this architecture stack that that is very complicated as well. And the underlying architecture could be a VMware framework, an OpenStack framework, or an AWS framework as your IaaS component, and it's all connected through the cloud provider interface. And so what is VMware doing about this? Well, VMware is also partnering and working very closely with our counterparts at Pivotal. And as you can see, for those companies that want to pursue microservices and containerization, there's a lot of limitations in the basic approach that they face. With the container engine needs to run inside of a VM, but what happens there is the traditional IT operations team loses visibility and manageability and security when they're trying to manage that, because they don't get all the same benefits that a VM provides to be able to manage those containers as if they were VMs. So what VMware is doing is they're now developing this new technology called vSphere Integrated Containers, in which the container engine will run natively inside the hypervisor, and they can put a wrapper around the container itself and be able to manage it in the same fashion that they do with VMs and gain all the additional benefits with DRS pools and security and all those other things that they're accustomed to today.
Yes.
But for those companies also that are looking to pursue deploying cloud native apps that are going to be massively scaled, they're also working very closely with Pivotal and our partner ecosystem to provide a cloud native platform, a pure cloud native platform called the Photon platform, in which you had the Photon controller and machine residing in that data center to support these cloud native apps at scale.
So the idea here is that for companies that already have an existing traditional IT infrastructure running on vSphere that everybody loves, it is easy for them to start playing in the web native applications or cloud native applications world by using something like the integrated containers concept. But for companies that have decided to completely shift over to cloud native applications or are primarily going to be cloud native applications, we have another solution around Photon, which is tailor-built to run cloud native applications and containers. So either way, VMware has the customers covered.
And so we also work with a lot of customers today that we may consider as being a bimodal organization. They may not understand that themselves, but when we're interfacing with them, it's important for us to understand that this is a company that is pursuing next-gen application development as well as maintaining their traditional infrastructure to keep the lights on and help the business continue to run, right?
Which is most of our customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when we look at how we can support those companies, we have an end-to-end solution that can help in both modes of IT. And we have infrastructure that can be used to support their legacy application environment, as well as infrastructure that can be used to support their next-gen and cloud-native application environment, as you previously seen. And so these IaaS nodes, again, can be an OpenStack framework, a VMware framework, such as the vRealize Automation Suite, or we have a lot of customers that subscribe to AWS and some public cloud providers. But we also have, out of our converged infrastructure portfolio, blocks, racks, and appliances. But it also standardizes on connecting to these IaaS environments through REST APIs. And so imagine what can be done even more with Viper Controller for those customers that want to take advantage of Viper Controller and automate a lot of their software-defined storage solutions. And Scale IO.
Right. So the idea here is, yes, it's for these organizations, they do need to run in some sort of bimodal mode where they're running their traditional applications and their next-gen application development. However, by using standardized offerings around our converged infrastructures stack that we offer today to customers, they are minimizing on wastage of time, resources, effort, money, trying to keep everything going, or that 80% fighting fires and keeping the lights on. We minimize that and bring some of the benefits of that cloud native application thinking back into the legacy part of the bimodal organization, which helps cut down cost, increase efficiencies, cut down the total cost of ownership, and generally makes the organization more lean and more flexible and more agile.
And then so when you want to help enable those customers that are also talking about being able to deliver this in a self-service portal so that their business can then consume their services a lot more easily, we also have the Federation Enterprise Hybrid Cloud solution that can help them.
That would fit here perfectly, yes.
Absolutely. And then so when we talk about this feedback loop, we also have within EMC and VMware an IT proven story as well, in which we have done this internally within our own IT operations, that we can share those stories with our customers, since we've gone through a lot of those lessons learned already, that they can adopt. But also, you can see that this is again that feedback loop in which you would have cross-functional DevOps teams that build and use continuous delivery tool chains, potentially have to re-engineer some of their legacy platforms and applications, and then continuously improve by implementing optimized processes and then measure that. So we can work with them and also help them leverage industry-leading tools in which our entire federation of companies has to be able to provide for them. But we also work with a lot of our partners in ServiceNow, Jenkins for continuous integration, Puppet, and Chef are a part of these solutions as well that we're able to work with our customers in delivering. Well, we also have an entire professional services organization around this as well. So when we do identify those customers that are looking into getting into some sort of DevOps practice, we have professional services experts that can help consult with those companies to help them on the road ahead or on their journey into getting into a DevOps organization. But as you can see, all along the way, we can identify a roadmap for them and consult with them all along the way. But we also, a good way to start is to bring them to an IT transformation workshop. And I've been involved in many of them, in which it's very nice because when we bring the customer to one of these workshops, they bring all of their key stakeholders within their business and their company into the room, and they're able to throw out all of their pain points and challenges that they want to resolve, and then throw them basically at the wall and try to prioritize that, and then lay out a roadmap for how they want to execute on some of those pain points that they want to resolve. So as you can see, EMC and our Federation of Companies can really help our customers, again, push the needle forward.
Yes.
So here's some resources that you can check out that would help you learn more about everything that we just talked about. And if you want to learn even more and start interfacing more with customers and those that are practicing DevOps, you can really learn a lot from them. And one thing that I've been doing is I've been going and participating in a lot of meetups within my local area and communities.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, so if DevOps is all about collaboration, not only are they collaborating internally, but they also want to be able to collaborate with some of their peers that work for other businesses and organizations that also have gone through some of those lessons learned. So this is a great format for them to go and, collaborate and discuss a lot of these topics even further to be able to learn from each other. And so here we go. We're going to get into the demo. And from here, as Raj mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things in which Pivotal Cloud Foundry can be used to help streamline a lot of processes that were traditionally very manual down to a single line to execute on. And we'll be able to review that and go over that.
Before we begin this demo, I wanted to put ourselves both in the shoes of the developer and IT operations. So as you can see, the developer, all they really care about is writing the code. Now, that's also a very important job too, because what the developers need to do is translate what the business is trying to ultimately achieve based on some of their strategic initiatives in which they have determined. That could either be writing new features to existing applications or writing a new application to satisfy some of their requirements that they have identified. Now, the IT operations staff has an equally important job too in regards to supporting that application workload and ensuring that it's going to be running in an environment that is very highly secure, highly available, but that it's also an environment that can be easily monitored against and that they can patch against it when necessary. So as you can see, they both have an equal share of important responsibilities to carry out. And so Pivotal Cloud Foundry is a framework in which provides that platform as a service that can validate that the code is going to run properly based on some of those requirements, that is going to run properly on the underlying infrastructure that has been determined they want their app to run in. That could either be an IaaS framework, that could be OpenStack, VMware, or AWS. But Pivotal Cloud Foundry would allow for that portability of that application workload to run against those environments. Now, as you can see, it can also be used as a tool to bridge the gap between the developer and operations and to be able to streamline the deployment of their code very efficiently. So for this demo, I'm actually using my subscription to Pivotal Web Services to use Cloud Foundry, but instead of having a local distribution of Pivotal Cloud Foundry that I need to manage, I can actually just subscribe to it to still use the Cloud Foundry framework to manage and deploy my apps, but I'm accessing it through my subscription. And as you can see, when I first log into the web interface, it gives me the command that I need to use to log into the environment that's associated to my account. And once I authenticate, then I need to sign into the org that is hosting my apps. And in this example, I'm actually going to be pushing a very simple app using the Python language that's going to assign me a globally unique identifier GUID when I access the app. And as you can see, this is the repo that is hosting my app in this directory, and this is the code for my app. And within this repo, there's also other files that are associated that define the requirements and the dependencies to my app that are necessary for my app to run. And what Cloud Foundry does is it reads that repository and validates that all the requirements and dependencies are satisfied so that it can push and deploy the app successfully. And so when I enter the simple command cf push and I name my app Nick Hello, I'm also giving it a memory restriction too, to only consume up to 128 meg of RAM. And so what this is doing is it's actually naming my app Nick Hello by using the Python code that I just showed you. And now it's going to be pushing that out so that it can be accessible through the internet. And now that my app has been successfully pushed, you can see it shows me the URL that can be used to access my app. Now, what I'm intending to do here is I have named my app and URL something that, say, isn't advertised to my customers, but I just want to test to ensure that the deployment of this app and code is going to work. Now, say that the app that I do have that is advertised to my customers is named My Simple App. Now I can still, within the same repo and using the same code, still deploy another instance of my application under a different namespace. So this shows you that you can, use the same code and repo to publish your app out into different namespaces or different environments. Say you want to push it out into a QA environment before it goes to production. This is demonstrating that capability. And so now, as you can see, my simple app has now been successfully pushed and published, and I got my unique identifier. It shows me my URL that I need to access the app. As you can see, the same code is pushed out in two different application instances under two different namespaces, and when I access them, I get two separate GUIDs. Now, I have this more sophisticated app as well that just has pretty much the same code that you saw previously, but there's additional information to enhance my app, such as additional text, and I also have added a hit counter to this. And as you can see, the hit counter is, you can think of it as a data set. So that data set still needs to be used and associated to my app to store the hit counter information. And what I'm trying to do here is just trying to generate traffic on my app, because I'm also monitoring that app as well. So you can see I have 3 separate instances of my app, and the service that I have used to store my data set for the hit counter is a Redis Cloud subscription service, which is a fully managed cloud service for hosting and running your data set in a highly available and scalable manner. Now, as we're looking through this marketplace here, these are also additional services in the Pivotal Web Services marketplace that you can subscribe to as well, that you can bind to your app and leverage these additional services. Now, I can also issue a command called CF Marketplace as well and see all these advertised services. And as you can see with Redis Cloud, there's different subscription plans. And if you look, that asterisk are the paid for plans. The ones that don't have an asterisk is actually a free plan. So I'm going to create a service to that free plan and name my service My Simple App Service. Because what I'm trying to do here is now bind this service to My Simple App so that I can store that data set that I need for my app. And so as you can see, it also shows that the service has been successfully created, but it's not bound to any app instance right now. So in order to bind it, I can just issue this simple command called cf bind service, my simple app, so the app name and then the service name. And it binded the service to the app very quickly, just like that. And so when I do a refresh now, you can see that my bound apps has a count of 1. And you can also see that my simple app, when I published it without defining the memory restrictions, it just published it with the default of 1 gig of RAM assigned to it. Now this proves that my service has been bound to it. So what we're trying to do here with the Solution Summit app that has the hit counter already associated to it is I'm also monitoring this app. I'm going to show you the Python code for this app. I'm also showing you the requirements here that I have to define, that I'm also using Redis and I'm also using New Relic to monitor my app. And you can see that they have also been defined in my Python code. Now, I can also, through the command line interface, analyze the environment for my app as well by doing a cf environment command. So with my app right now, it is has been published with only one instance. So I'm only getting one GUID every time I hit refresh and hit this page. But you can also see I'm monitoring this app in real time, and furthermore, it's also monitoring all the different elements of my app as well. It's monitoring how fast Redis is responding, the page and everything. And what I'm trying to show here is that I want to be able to scale my app out into 5 instances. And as you can see, just by issuing that simple command, it very quickly scaled my app out to 5 instances. Now what that will do is every time I hit refresh on this page and access my app, it's still maintaining my hit counts. But as you can see, it's going to give me a different GUID every time I hit the app. And what this is demonstrating is that the scalability worked, but also it's doing a round robin across all the instances and giving me a different GUID each time I'm hitting that different instance. Now I also want to scale my app out to 10 instances. So I went ahead and do that, and as you can see, I'm going to eventually end up getting 10 different GUIDs. Now, as you can see also, when I was doing this, it actually reset the hit counter every time. So say another additional feature that I wanted to add to my app would be so that every time I scale it out or scale it down, that the hit counter will not reset. So as you can see from the presentation earlier, that every time I want to introduce a new feature through that feedback loop, this may be a feature that was identified in that feedback loop, so I may want to go ahead and incorporate this new feature so that my hit counter does not reset. Now also you can see here that this is where I have my app published in GitHub, and I am practicing continuous integration on my app. Every time I make a change to it, I'm using Travis CI to monitor those changes, and as every additional feature is being added to the app, it is tracking and monitoring that as well, so everybody has visibility into all the changes that are being made. So this demonstrates a continuous integration practice. Now furthermore, as I'm monitoring my app, you can see how my app is responding within it, but also I can look at the environment and how that environment is responding as well. So what this demonstrates is, think about how you can optimize not only your app and see how your app is responding, but as you move that app around and take advantage of the portability that Cloud Foundry gives you by being able to move your app out into different IaaS, underlying infrastructure environments. If you couple the monitoring of the app and how it's performing up the app stack, but then you can also monitor how the infrastructure is performing that is supporting that application workload, this can be very powerful to the DevOps teams to ensure that your app is not only going to be deployed out into the necessary environments that make sense to support that app workload, but then you can also start evaluating you know, the cost of supporting and running the app as well to ensure that it's going to be in the most cost-effective environment.